Hello, everyone, and welcome to this podcast from the Light Review. And I think we've got a very interesting conversation going on this afternoon, because one of the things that we are starting to become aware of is the idea that LEDs are there not only as brand new product, but they are a fantastic tool for going back and looking at old kit and refitting to create a whole new and improved lighting installation. With us today, we have Julian Birch, who's the MD and the owner of Optoled, and in Somerset. Hello, Julian.
Hi, John.
And we've got Elizabeth Cooper, who's a senior lighting designer at Arup in Leeds. Hello, Liz.
Hello.
Hi. Now, we are looking at a project. The reason that we're all here is that Liz, as part of the lighting design team up at Arup in Leeds, they come up with the idea that they needed some new lighting. And rather than just chuck the old stuff away, they looked around to see what they could do and got in touch with Optoled. And what came out of that is this conversation, which is terribly exciting. And Julian and I have already spoken about retrofit lighting, haven't we, in a previous podcast?
We have indeed.
But we're back again talking about the same thing because it's that important. Right, I'm going to take a bit of a back seat here, and I'm just going to let Liz and Julian tell the story. And then when we get to the end of the presentation, we can have another chat. And whatever happens, whatever fascinating things we're going to come up with in the next few minutes, we can keep on talking. Liz, I think it's over to you. Tell us how it all started.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the office in Leeds is about a 20-minute walk from the train station, and it's just over 350 people over the 4 floors. And we have an aspiration at Arup to become a carbon zero business. So that means that everything that we try to design, everything we do, it's always leading back to how can we make this more sustainable and how can we make our planet better. When I was approached by our facilities manager, who had some concerns over the maintenance of the existing lighting system, it kind of brought everything that we'd been thinking about internally and even externally to the front of our heads, and kind of thought, why not try and do something a bit more imaginative than just putting something new in? So we thought about the existing fixtures and thought about how we could implement the circular lighting themes into this office. And I'm actually here today, and it's yeah, it's looking good behind me. I have so the circular lighting principles are wanting to capture all of the elements of the light fixture and upcycle them or downcycle them back into their raw materials so that they can go back into the cycle of use. We also wanted it to be adaptable, so having a system that could be flexible for the end user and for me to be able to adapt it over time, and especially help with the maintenance team, bringing in any concerns that they've got and helping them. And then also at the forefront is the highest of quality design, so making sure that everyone it was in agreement with what we were thinking, and you know, just bringing all of those elements together to create a much more successful lighting solution. So we started off by looking at the original fit out, which I found out is at least 15 years old. And what was interesting was about 5 years ago, there was the maintenance team were asked to swap the lamps for happy lamps, which basically means that they are 6,500 Kelvin. And they are, the perception, I think, was that it was somehow brighter and cooler. So people responded to that in quite a positive way. And 5 years ago, they swapped out probably a very, very warm and shifting color temperature to this very, very cool color temperature. And it's very unusual in the industry to see 6,500 Kelvin. So that was immediately quite of a surprise to us. The original fixtures are by Optama. So reached out to Jules and Neil and got them to come in, and to work on trying to find a way of upgrading these fixtures, because we didn't want to take them down. There wasn't any point in removing them. They're perfectly fine. We found some samples in the cupboard and dusted them off, and I gave Jules that one that I'm holding up right, so that there was a profile that we could work towards to see how the LED cassette that we were going to put into that fixture, how it would fit. And yeah, the louvers, they were a bit bent and battered, but I mean, you know, a little bit of straightening out and they work fine. And actually it's quite a nice design because it's very, very soft, and, you know, don't get direct visibility from the fixture at all. But Jules, you can probably chip in here and tell us about how you approached it a little bit as well.
Yeah, look, indeed. I mean, this was, like you say, a very early sort of system from Optama, and as you say, sort of, you know, sort of nice sort of flowing lines rather than the sort of angular, you know, products that we kind of see more typically today. The louver again is, you know, just an early technology of kind of limiting the glare and sort of making something look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But the principle is the same. You know, it's another aluminium lighting system that could be easily sort of upscaled because, you know, you've got a lot of good material there that's highly anodized, so it's a nice finish, very sort of cleanable, and you've got a wiring bus already embedded. So, you know, if we're looking at replacing that, you're not just replacing the lighting, you're replacing all the electrical components and all the electrical feeds going to it. So with Liz's direction, we're kind of looking at sort of upgrading the, you know, the lighting technology to be not just more efficient, but also using the kind of the embedded resource that we currently had within the system. And that made a lot of, you know, good sense. But we wanted the additional extra control around sort of dimming, daylight sensing, proximity sensor that the system didn't have in abundance before. And so that just added a great deal of extra value without having to put too much energy into finding that solution.
Yeah, so the original scheme did have PIR sensors. There's one on every single line, which tracks people as they come across the office floor. But previously, it would be an on-off and there would be no dimming, obviously. So, but I think that happened about 5 years ago. And the office was kind of ahead of its time using that technology from then. Yeah, we decided to do a mock-up because in my head I was thinking, well, 6,500 is quite cool. And it's not the most comfortable to sit under, even though, you know, it's all subjective, obviously. Everyone's different. But I could feel it when it was darker evenings in the winter. I definitely felt like it was quite straining to be able to work underneath it. So I wanted to try and see whether or not I was alone in this assumption. And so we did a mock-up and we tested, I think this was the Quad 100, possibly. Yeah, well, Quad 100 in a 4,000 Kelvin. And then I think in the background of that image, there's just the lamp, the T8 lamp that was there previously. But the difference, goodness. So we did that first and got some feedback about the fixture and how it fitted within the housing. And then I also decided to have a little look at different options because I wasn't happy just picking one. I wanted to see whether or not there was anything else out there. So the first image here is the Quad 100, which is obviously a little bit wider, a smoother surface for light to filter through, but direct and indirect. All of these are direct and indirect, to capture the lovely coffered ceilings and provide indirect light. The second one was slightly narrower, and it did emulate a fluorescent tube in a way, but it still felt to me a little bit too glary, so I was already preferring the wider fixture. And then we thought, why not try for something that we could potentially easily do a quick fix replacement and see how that works. And so we had a T8 LED replacement module, which was, we had two samples, and one of them didn't work, so it was sort of like off. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we were putting in would have longevity and stand the test of time. So, but it helped to have at least two fixtures that were 4,000 Kelvin in the mock-up. So it was one of these strips behind me. All three of them were replaced, and I did a survey with the office to understand what the general feeling was, and luckily, maybe the general consensus was to go with 4,000 Kelvin, which is warmer, more approachable, and also brings out the brick warm tones in the brick that's in the office as well. So yeah, what did this change? Because obviously we did this survey, about 10% of the office actually answered it, which is quite high turnout, I thought. But it meant that we changed from the 6,500 Kelvin to 4,000. And also I wanted to make sure that we were bringing in all of our sustainability goals, so daylight linking through a Bluetooth mesh control system. And that allowed then loads of flexibility to do scene setting and controls with the conference rooms compared to the open office areas. So yeah, that was really great. Yeah. So yeah, in summary, all of those numbers are on the screen, but we are currently saving around 55% on the traditional 58 watt fluorescent tubes. So, and that's with daylight dimming. We're saving lots of carbon, and the aluminium, obviously, there's a huge reduction in the amount of aluminium within just a cassette versus replacing the whole fixture. And we've got much more sensitive PIRs, and they are working very well to capture movement and also to time out, so that the office does switch down when everyone's left. And then yeah, flexibility for improving the system as the office comes back as well. So yeah. Do you want to talk around the energy saving and also the carbon savings?
Yeah, look, indeed. I mean, we've got obviously the energy savings, arriving from sort of upgrading to a more efficient source, and then adding the extra controls is just sort of embedding that even further. But looking at the numbers, when you look at how much CO2 is produced in just, sort of generating 1 ton of aluminium, we create 11 to 12 tons of CO2 emission just to produce 1 ton. And we've saved half a ton there, really. I mean, just by not, replacing it with something new and scrapping it. So, it's a real positive. So, not only are we sort of saving by upscaling and regenerating what we've got, but also upgrading it to a more controllable, efficient source kind of ticks all the boxes, really. And I have to say, it's a really lovely project. I mean, it's a very interesting space to start with. And
yeah, definitely.
Control, the direct, indirect. I'm surprised. I like the idea of happy lamps, though. I kind of think that's something we ought to hit on. But
yeah.
And also 4,000K, coming across as being a fairly warm color temperature in comparison.
I know.
Used to.
Yeah, definitely. We always consider it more of a neutral white, don't we?
We do. Yeah, it just looks right there. When you compare it to 6,500, it just looks so warm, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
Do you mind if I
Definitely.
ask about this? Because if we think of it in terms of that dreaded phrase human-centric lighting that none of us are meant to use anymore. The 6,500 Kelvin apparently, allegedly, is exactly what we should be using certainly before midday, and then sort of dropping it back as we get later into the afternoon. Is that actually what you found? Was the problem an end of day problem, or actually once you started to look at it, you just went, actually this isn't right?
For me, it's a very, very well daylit space. Anyway, there's east-west facing windows, so you're always going to get daylight through the day. So there's no real need for, in my opinion, for having circadian lighting or dynamic white or anything like that, because you're very, very close to a window. I'm 2 desks away from one. It's nothing. It's a very, very narrow floor plan. So when it got to the end of the day, that's when you suddenly realize that you've got this very, very cool white above you, which, I mean, and some of them were flickering as well. So there's plenty of failures and everything else. So there's none of that really helps. And it didn't jar well for your end of day experience, I don't think.
Thanks, because I think that's the sort of thing that we need. We need that kind of feedback. Because again, if you try and do the crude thing, I'm not suggesting that Arup decided to do a crude thing, but they did by slamming in 6,500 all the way through the day, all the way through the year.
It was from yeah, well, it was, I mean, yeah. There was a bit of feedback from the office a few years ago, and that's the way that it went. But that's why I wanted to make sure that I wasn't recreating, or, you know, I wanted to ask the audience in a way and find out what everyone actually wanted in their space, because it's not just me.
And we learned that the lighting, the lit environment is an evolutionary thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sometimes we appreciate a difference, but then we appreciate another difference once we realize that the first difference is not as good as maybe we hoped it was going to be. Julian, for you, I again, the fascination of just saying, oh no, here's a load of old fittings. They're very nice fittings, but my word, it's just old stuff. And now look what we're going to do. We've got to find a way to keep these things alive, do a little bit of CPR on it, and put them back up on the ceiling. Was this one of your early retrofit projects, or were you already sort of in the groove for this one when it started?
We kind of started a little bit before this. I mean, this was one of the projects that kind of cemented, you know, sort of our thoughts around doing a sort of a more grown-up retrofit solution, that bit that kind of goes past a typical plug-in lamp that would just be the retrofit. So we wanted to put together a range of kind of more around linear product initially, that were Zaga approved, that would, you know, sort of scalable again, you know, for the next generation to come, you know, in 10, 15 years time. Again, they could be upscaled again without having to, you know, sort of change even more of the material. But it kind of gave us the, you know, the idea to kind of offer this retrofit range, because there are so many good luminaires still out there that just aren't so efficient today, that could be efficient today and still look fantastic.
Yeah. I've got here's a little bit of a subversive thought for anybody who wants to pick it up. On the one hand, we are being moved closer and closer into things like the WELL standard. And even with projects that aren't formal WELL projects, there's kind of an understanding that that's where we're headed, and that's kind of the touchstone that puts us into a place. And then on the other hand, we've got old installations that have still got some life in them. And I wonder which trumps which, whether you stay with an old installation because you can save loads of carbon. The figures that you've got there are really very, very impressive. And whether that becomes more important than saying, well, we've got a UGR of 17. And we need, and that's what we, and if you can't do that, then we're going to scrap all those fittings, because you've got to do that. Where do we think we are? Are we going to do, let me say where I am. Do we do the practical thing and say we keep these things alive even though they don't quite meet spec? Or do we chuck them away because they don't quite meet spec? Liz?
Well, you could possibly change the fixture and make it meet spec. You know, if there's if it's a case of UGR, which is very important, obviously, for the visual comfort of the space, perhaps it's a small tweak to the fixture. It doesn't have to necessarily be a brand new fixture, does it?
Oh no, certainly not. But I'm just thinking I doubt if those fixtures there meet the well standard, because they're not going to be UGR 7. They might just scrape through on UGR 21 or something or whatever.
I don't know.
No,
I'd have to find out.
Have we got a clue, Julian? They do not look like low glare fittings to me, because I like them.
Yeah, well, they're ladder louvers, so in one direction they will meet the standard. In the other direction they probably wouldn't. But I'm probably more in favour of upscaling and, you know, not quite meeting spec, but everybody's used to the luminaire. You can enhance and improve the quality of light. You know, if somebody's been living in a space for many years, they're quite used to that. You know, we're used to, you know, if you're in a sunny country, you're used to sunshine every day. You know, our eye compensates for an awful lot of bad lighting design. So I'd be in favour of upscaling, I think, and doing your best to meet the new standards and regulations. And there are ways to improve, you know, UGR values and things, along the way with new microprism and optic controls and everything else. So I'd be sort of leaning more to upscaling rather than replacing just to meet a standard, I think.
Yeah.
I have to say that, those of us, Julian, of an age who remember the 1980s and remember our tartan grid ceilings and remember all of those special architecturally based lighting installations that we were obliged to create, they're all due for refurbishment now. Because they're at least 20 years old. They're more likely 30 years old, some of them.
Yeah.
So this is the way out of this, isn't it? This is, I mean, I know that you've done work like this. You've gone back into the old tartan grid, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. And again, they were kind of easier to upscale, really, because you are using different optics to the old sort of parabolic open louvers that you used to get. That used to hide half the light behind the vanes and then bounce the rest of the light that you had inside the luminaire and didn't actually squeeze much out of it. But you had a nice dark ceiling, put it that way. But
you did.
Upscaling it, those are quite easy to do. And even without a DALI system, you know, with the Bluetooth mesh networking that Liz was talking about, sort of adding the controls without adding the extra cabling does make so much easier today, you know.
Well, it is, yeah.
And again, you know, with the software that in order to control these and zone these, you don't need big complicated head end units anymore. You know, it's all done from an app on your phone, and
it is
tie it all together and it works, you know, seamlessly. It works.
Liz, is this a message that you are now confidently taking out to clients, that one of the options that they've got?
Yeah, definitely.
Do they get it?
Yes, hopefully. No, we're definitely looking at it, well, certainly within our own offices, and you know, it's not the first office that I've redone in Arup, but this is the first time I've actually retrofitted the existing fixtures, so it was definitely a learning curve, but I'm really glad to have had the experience. So now that I can confidently go ahead and tell our clients that it's doable and we should be doing more of it, for sure. Great news, guys. Thank you very much, because I think this is very useful, and I think an awful lot more doors need to be knocked on Mhm.
to get that message across to them. So thank you for your time, Liz.
Thank
Great
you.
for that, and well done on the project. Julian, congratulations to you, of course, sir. Another winner, and we look for many more of them. And for all of you who have been amazed by this presentation and the work that's been done here, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, and see you again soon.